It started with a single mistake, one flight attendant, one child, and one slap that would shake an empire. By the time the jet door sealed, cameras were rolling, a million eyes were watching, and Justice had just boarded Flight 1847. The late afternoon light poured through the windows of JFK Terminal 7, catching the shine of polished floors and the muted rustle of travelers. Gate 24 buzzed with the rhythm of goodbyes and impatience. Among the clusters of business travelers and families, a young boy stood apart, tall for 12, sharp eyes, posture straight like his mother had taught him. His name was Ethan Royce, and today was supposed to be his first solo flight. He wore the same navy blue travel blazer his mother had tailored for him, embroidered discreetly with their family initials. To most, he looked like the well-mannered son of a corporate family, flying to attend an aviation camp in Seattle. To anyone who looked closer, if they ever bothered to, he was the son of Dr. Leanna Royce, the CEO and majority shareholder of Atlas Aero, one of the largest airline groups in the world. But nobody looked closer. That was the point. Seat 3A, Ethan murmured, glancing down at his boarding pass. He smiled faintly at the thought of his mom's message before takeoff. Remember, respect others, even when they forget to respect you. He joined the first-class line quietly, earbuds in, listening to a podcast about ethics in technology. Across from him, passengers scrolled through their phones, some glancing at him with vague curiosity. A kid alone in first class drew attention, but not sympathy. At the jet bridge, flight attendant Karen Lowell greeted passengers with the polished smile of someone who had said, "Welcome aboard," 10,000 times. Her uniform was perfect, her tone crisp, her eyes scanning every face for compliance. When Ethan reached the door, her expression faltered. "Excuse me, young man," she said sharply. "First-class boarding is for premium passengers." Ethan held out his boarding pass. "Yes, ma'am. 3A. Karen frowned, scanning it twice. "That can't be right." She gave a small, incredulous laugh. "Honey, this seat costs more than most people's rent. You sure you didn't get the rows mixed up?" A few passengers glanced over. A man in a business suit smirked. Someone chuckled. Ethan's chest tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "No, ma'am. It's correct." Karen's polite mask thinned. "Why don't you wait by the galley while I sort this out? We'll find you something more." She paused, her gaze sliding over his brown skin, his curls, his accent too calm for her comfort. Appropriate. The word hit like static. Ethan's fingers curled around his backpack strap. His mother's voice echoed in his mind again. "Stay calm. Dignity isn't silence. It's control." He didn't move. "This is my seat, ma'am." Karen's smile snapped. "Don't talk back to me, young man. You don't get to make the rules on this plane." "I'm not trying to," Ethan said quietly. The slap came so fast even she seemed surprised. The sound cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. Every conversation froze. A toddler stopped crying. A flight attendant down the aisle gasped, dropping her stack of menus. Karen's voice shook, not with guilt, but with authority. "That's for speaking disrespectfully to crew." Ethan's cheek stung hot, but his voice was a whisper. "You hit me." Her jaw tightened. "And you'll sit quietly, or you won't be flying at all." A businessman in 2C shifted, muttering, "Unbelievable," but didn't interfere. Others stared at their phones, recording in silence. The cabin air grew heavy, the kind of tension that comes before something irreversible. Ethan didn't cry. He only reached into his jacket, pulling out his phone. The screen lit up with a single contact pinned to the top. Mom, Leanna Royce. He pressed the call button. Karen rolled her eyes. "Who do you think you're calling, sweetie? Your nanny?" "No," Ethan said softly. "My mother." The line connected instantly. "Ethan, are you safe?" Her voice, calm, low, and powerful, carried through the receiver like quiet thunder. Ethan swallowed. "She hit me, Mom. The flight attendant. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything." A silence followed. Not hesitation. Calculation. The kind that only leaders carried. Then she said 6 words that would change everything. "Stay seated. Don't move. 1 minute." And that was when the world shifted. Karen scoffed. "Put that away, or—" But her words broke off as the intercom chimed twice. A voice from the cockpit crackled, confused. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We've just received an override from corporate. Ground control is requesting all operations hold for flight 1847. Passengers looked around, whispering. Phones lit up again. Karen's face drained of color. She turned toward Ethan. What is this?" Ethan didn't answer. He just looked out the window at the tarmac, where ground crew had frozen mid-motion. Even the baggage carts had stopped. The engines went silent. The entire airport seemed to pause, like someone had pressed stop on the world. And in that breathless quiet, as everyone waited for the next announcement, one thought pulsed through the cabin. This wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't just about a slap. It was about dignity, and what happens when the world finally witnesses what it's been ignoring. The screen fades to black. A faint heartbeat sound plays under the text. 1 call, 1 minute. A system built on arrogance just met its reckoning. And this, as the narrator would later say, wasn't a revenge story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. 10 minutes earlier, the jet bridge breathed cool air into the cabin as passengers drifted in clumps and trickles. Briefcases first, then strollers and sleepy toddlers. Then the quiet tide of people who looked practiced at waiting. First class glowed under soft LEDs, a little island of warm light and hushed manners. Ethan stepped in with his boarding pass held the way his mother had taught him. Between thumb and index finger, face up, information visible. No swagger, no apology. "Welcome aboard," said the brunette flight attendant at the door without looking up. Her name badge caught the light. Karen. The syllables sounded like a stamp. "Let me see your pass," he offered it. She scanned, then blinked, as if the numbers were out of order. 3A, she repeated, tilting the paper as though the angle might fix the truth. Her eyes flicked to his blazer, then to his sneakers, then, briefly, to his skin. Something settled in her expression. Not shock, not confusion. Something quieter and colder, sorting. "First class is to your left," she said, but she didn't step aside. "Do you need help finding your seat?" "I'm okay, ma'am." Ethan kept his voice small and steady. 3A. He edged past her with the practiced grace of a kid used to adult spaces. A businessman in 2C didn't move his knees until Ethan murmured, "Excuse me." And even then he barely budged, like he was doing the boy a favor. Across the aisle, a woman in a cream sweater smiled at Ethan, then quickly broke eye contact when she noticed Karen watching. Seat 3A waited by the window like a promise he'd worked hard to keep. Ethan slid his backpack under the footwell, lined up his shoes so they didn't scuff the paneling, and set his folded blazer on the armrest. He breathed in the airplane smell, cleaner, metal, something faintly citrus, and felt that little lift inside his chest. He liked planes because rules made sense here. Everyone had a number. Everyone had a seat. If you followed the line and held your pass, you belonged. Karen arrived with a tray of paper napkins she didn't offer. She looked past him to the window, as if the sky might provide an explanation. "Sweetheart," she said finally, bright as a storefront. "Where are your parents?" "My mom dropped me at the curb. She's at work." "At work?" Karen echoed, nodding. She straightened the already straight headrest, then the already straight safety card. "And you're certain you're meant to be here?" Ethan held up the pass again. Her gaze skimmed over the name, Ethan Royce, like it was a clerical error waiting to be fixed. A second flight attendant, Melissa, passed with a stack of menus and an exhausted smile. She gave Ethan a quick, real glance, soft, human, and kept moving. Karen stayed. "These seats," Karen began, then paused, choosing words with a politeness wrapped like tissue around something harder. "They're premium. Mistakes happen." Ethan swallowed. "No mistake, ma'am." Karen touched the corner of his armrest and lowered her voice. "We can get you settled further back. There's a bulkhead row that's much more comfortable for kids. From 2C, the businessman chuckled into his news app. He looks comfortable enough to me. Karen's lashes fluttered. Sir, we're addressing a seating concern. She turned back to Ethan, smile fixed. Wouldn't you prefer to sit near others your age? My seat is 3A, Ethan said, softer now, because softness felt safer. I can show you the receipt if you want. Karen's smile thinned to a line. No need for attitude. She pivoted her body toward the aisle, a subtle claim to space that nudged him smaller. I'll speak to the gate about moving you. Stay put. Ethan looked down at his hands. His fingers had that prickle he got when a teacher called him by the wrong name and then didn't believe him when he corrected it. He thought of his mom's last text, the one he kept rereading. Be kind, even when others forget how. He tucked the boarding pass into his pocket so carefully, it felt like prayer. Across the aisle, the woman in the cream sweater leaned in, voice low. You okay? Ethan nodded without turning. Yes, ma'am. Karen returned with authority in her walk and a tablet in her hand. I spoke with the gate, she announced, though her tablet screen was still dark. We can offer you a seat in main cabin extra, row 9. Plenty of legroom. Complimentary snack. The way she said complimentary carried a dare. Be grateful. I'd like to keep my seat, Ethan answered, almost whispering. Karen exhaled through her nose. The LED above 3A threw a pale halo on the crown of her hair. Listen, she said, and the cordial tone fell away. I know how these things happen. Someone books the wrong fare or uses points they shouldn't, and then a kid shows up here and we're all supposed to pretend it's normal. Karen, Melissa said quietly from the galley, a warning lined with fatigue. Karen didn't glance back. But this is a premium cabin. Standards matter. If you're not where you belong, we correct it. That's how order works. Ethan's cheeks warmed. The words didn't land like corrections. They landed like labels. He felt the circle close around him. The polite laugh, the averted eyes. The word belong used like a door that could lock from only one side. He set his phone face down on the tray table so he wouldn't squeeze it. I'm where my ticket says I belong. Karen's smile returned, thinner than paper. That's enough. You'll move when I tell you to. A small bump of the jet bridge made the water in a waiting glass shiver. The cabin sound shifted as if the plane itself listened. The woman in cream sweater pressed her lips together. The businessman in 2C cleared his throat and pretended to scroll. Melissa stepped closer. Karen, let it go. He has 3A. And I have a job, Karen replied, which includes keeping this cabin in order. She bent, close enough that Ethan could smell the mint on her breath. You can cooperate, or security can explain it to you at the gate. Ethan's heartbeat ticked in his ears, counting, measuring, keeping time with an old instinct his mother called self-rescue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue rules with someone who loved them for the wrong reason. He did the only thing that had ever worked when adults mistook quiet for guilt. He made himself very, very still. Silence collected on the armrests and screens. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a premium cabin. It was the brittle quiet of a room holding its breath. A boy in row 4 peeked between seats until his father tugged him back. 2 college-age girls in 1D1F exchanged glances and, without speaking, angled a phone toward 3A. The lens wavered, then steadied. A red dot blinked life. What's your name? Karen asked. Pen poised as if scribbling it made it truer. Ethan, he said. He did not add Royce. He didn't want his family to bear the weight of this moment, even in name. The last thing he wanted was to make his mother famous for his hurt. Karen wrote anyway. And who paid for your ticket, Ethan? He heard the question that wasn't a question. He thought of allowance money, side projects, the scholarship for summer aviation camp, all the little ways he tried to be worth the space he took up. None of it answered what she was really asking. Who let you sit here? My mother, he said. Karen nodded, lips pursed into a shape that meant, of course she did. And what does your mother do? Melissa's head turned sharply. Karen. What? We're verifying. Karen's voice carried now, an announcement disguised as inquiry. If he belongs here, there's nothing to worry about. Ethan looked at the window, the wing's silver curve bending toward a sky he knew by heart from diagrams and daydreams. He wanted to say, she runs things. He wanted to say, she builds systems that don't collapse under small men with big titles. He settled on the truth that revealed the least. She works, he said. Karen's eyes cooled. Don't be smart with me. I'm not. He kept his hands flat so she wouldn't think fists. I'm answering. It took almost nothing, a breath, a tone, the gravity of a uniform, to turn a child into a problem. Ethan felt it happen by degrees. Suspicion, instruction, escalation. Not because he'd done something, but because she needed him to be something she could correct. The gate agent's voice floated down the jet bridge. Door closing in 2. Melissa adjusted a latch. Karen straightened, satisfied with a balance only she could see. After takeoff, she said, I'll find you a more suitable seat. Ethan didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He fixed his eyes on the safety card as if it contained a secret clause saying, You are allowed to exist here. Around him, adult silence arranged itself like furniture, elegant, expensive, and heavy when it falls. From 1D, the phone's lens held steady. The red dot kept blinking. Somewhere in its glass, the first frame of a story had already begun. A boy in 3A, a uniform in the aisle. A face learning how disbelief looks when it pretends to be order. The door sealed with a hiss. The cabin light softened. Seatbelts clicked. Ethan tucked his boarding pass deeper into his pocket and felt the paper edge bite his palm. A small, precise pain that told him he was awake. Later, people would argue about words, tone, policy, procedure. They would map escalation like a flowchart. But right then, in the measured air between 2 announcements, it was simpler. Someone had looked at a child and decided a number on a ticket couldn't be true if a face looked like his. He closed his eyes. He counted his breaths. He waited for the part where dignity would require a voice. And when it came, he promised himself, it would be steady. The moment it happened, time didn't slow down. It collapsed. A sharp crack of sound split through the hum of recycled air, slapping against every metal wall, every breath in first class. For 1/2 second, no one moved. Even the engines seemed to pause. Karen Lowell's hand hung midair like it didn't belong to her, fingers trembling in disbelief at what they'd just done. Ethan Royce's head turned slightly from the impact, a faint red mark already blooming across his cheek. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." And just like that, the world tilted. Melissa, the second flight attendant, dropped her tray of glasses with a clatter. "Karen, what the hell was that?" Karen's voice came out clipped, defensive, too quick. "He was being disrespectful. You saw, he wouldn't listen." "He's a child," Melissa hissed. "You hit him." The businessman in 2C lowered his newspaper slowly. His voice came dry, tight. "You should probably stop talking." Karen flushed, her face a storm of denial and control. She turned back to Ethan, her tone shifting to something official. "You can't speak to crew that way. Now sit still and don't cause a scene." But the scene was already made. Dozens of eyes now pointed toward the boy in seat 3A, who sat frozen, cheeks burning. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just breathed through the weight pressing down on him. The familiar kind of silence followed. The one that came when people saw injustice but didn't want to be part of it. That silence was worse than the slap. Melissa crouched near Ethan, her voice softer now. "Are you all right?" He nodded once, though his throat felt thick. "I'm fine." Karen straightened her uniform, her voice sharp enough to slice through sympathy. "We'll handle this after takeoff. Let's not hold the flight for dramatics." Her tone carried that polite poison the world had trained Ethan to recognize since he was old enough to read a room. It said, "Be quiet, and maybe we'll let you belong again." But something inside him refused. His fingers twitched toward his pocket. The edges of his boarding pass scraped his fingertips, a reminder of order, of truth. He pulled out his phone instead. His thumb hovered over one name. Mom. Dr. Liana Royce. He didn't hesitate. He pressed call. Ethan? Her voice came instantly, clear and controlled. His chest tightened. She hit me, Mom. Liana didn't respond at first. Silence stretched on the line, waited, deliberate. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, precise, and terrifying in its calm. Where are you right now? Still in my seat, 3A. Good. Stay there. Don't move. I'll handle it. The line clicked off. Ethan stared at his reflection in the window. Outside, a tug truck hummed, lights flashing on the tarmac. Everything else felt still. Then, exactly 1 minute later, the intercom tone chimed. Twice. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice came uncertain, a crack in his authority. We've been asked by ground control to pause all movement. Please remain seated. Heads lifted. Murmurs rippled. Phones tilted discreetly to record. Karen blinked, confused. What's happening? She muttered. Melissa checked her tablet. All departures are frozen. We just got an override. Override. Corporate, Melissa said. Level 1 code. Karen's face drained. That's impossible. Only the CEO, her words died mid-sentence as realization hit. She looked at Ethan, sitting perfectly still, phone in his lap. You didn't, she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. In the control tower, messages flickered across screens. Priority alert. Hold flight 11847. Executive order override. No one argued. No one questioned who could issue such a command. Only one person had that level of access. Dr. Liana Royce, CEO and majority shareholder of Atlas Aero. Back in the cabin, the passengers began to stir, sensing something larger than protocol unfolding. Is this about the kid? Someone whispered. Did he just get the flight grounded? Another asked. Who is he? Karen turned, voice shaking now. You don't understand. I didn't mean... But it was too late for meaning. Every phone in the first-class cabin was recording now, capturing every flicker of her panic, her face, her tone, her excuses. Ethan's reflection stared back at him from the window, half boy, half storm. The captain opened the cockpit door slightly. Confusion etched across his brow. Ms. Lowell, a representative from headquarters is on the line asking for a full incident report before we move an inch. Karen swallowed. Headquarters? Already? Yes, the captain said slowly. And they used the word incident. You want to tell me why? She stammered. It's nothing serious. A misunderstanding. I was maintaining discipline. Melissa's voice cut in. She struck a passenger, Captain. The cabin froze again. The captain's eyes widened. You what? He was out of line, and... He raised a hand, voice clipped. Don't say another word. Sit down. The authority shift was instant and absolute. Karen sank into a jump seat, trembling. Her perfect posture collapsed. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft, the ripple had already become a wave. The Atlas Aero operations room in Manhattan was lighting up with notifications. Trending alerts pinged. Hat flight 147 hat dignity in the sky / justice in one call. A 19-year-old student named Zoe Kim had uploaded a 47-second clip to TikTok showing Karen's raised hand and Ethan's calm face. By the end of the minute, it had over 50,000 views. Within 10 minutes, 500,000. But Ethan didn't know that yet. All he knew was the sound of his mother's voice replaying in his head. Don't move! He sat there, steady and silent, as the world rearranged itself around him. The man in 2C looked over finally, eyes soft with something like shame. You okay, kid? Ethan gave a small nod. His cheek still stung, but his dignity was intact. That mattered more than comfort. Karen stared out at the cabin that had turned against her. It was a misunderstanding, she murmured to no one. He provoked me. He made me look bad. Melissa shook her head. You did that yourself. The captain picked up the cabin phone, speaking low. Yes, this is Flight 1947. We've halted operations per CEO order. Yes, she's here. Understood. He hung up, eyes flicking toward Ethan. Something like respect crossed his face. Then he said quietly, "They'll be boarding in 5. Karen blinked. Who? The executives, he said. From Atlas. Her throat went dry. Here? Why? Melissa glanced at Ethan. Because sometimes justice flies first class, too. Outside, black sedans rolled up the jet bridge. The kind that didn't wait in lines. In seat 3A, Ethan exhaled slowly. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know the live streams, the headlines, the fury that would follow. All he knew was that something long overdue had started moving, and this time, it wouldn't stop at words. He pressed his palm against his cheek and whispered what his mother once told him on a night she won her first boardroom war. Dignity doesn't shout. It waits, and then it answers. And somewhere deep in the heart of the airline, systems began to wake. Silence came down like a curtain. Not the pleasant hush people pay extra for, the one padded with hot towels and chilled glasses. This was the brittle kind. The kind that crackles when you breathe too loud. The kind that has a weight and a temperature. Ethan could feel it on his skin where Karen's handprint still burned, a warm oval pulsing under cool cabin air. No one moved first. That was part of it. You could feel the whole room waiting, like a jury that hadn't agreed to be one. Seatbelt signs glowed a steady amber. A child somewhere in row 5 hiccuped into a parent's sleeve and went quiet again. In the galley, ice shifted in a metal bin, the sound too loud for its size. The jet bridge had already pulled away. The cabin door was locked. There was nowhere for the moment to go but deeper. Karen Lowell stayed planted in the jump seat across from 3A, hands folded hard, eyes fixed on a point somewhere above Ethan's head. She had put her authority back on like a jacket, straight, crisp, full of corners. But it didn't sit the same. Her jaw worked like she was chewing a regret she wouldn't swallow. Melissa stood a pace behind her, as if proximity alone might keep more damage from happening. She kept looking at Ethan without staring. Little checks the way you check a heartbeat on someone who says they're fine. "All right, folks," Karen said finally, that bright gate agent voice back in place. "We're going to remain seated while the captain coordinates with ground. This will only take a moment." She didn't look at Ethan when she said it, which somehow made the words land harder. A cough from 2C. "Maybe it'll take as long as it needs to," the businessman said, like a man trying on courage in a dressing room. He didn't try it in Karen's size. He went back to the comfort of his screen. Across the aisle, the woman in the cream sweater. Ethan had noticed her wedding ring was worn down at the underside, a soft half moon. Pulled a tissue from her bag and set it on his armrest. No fuss, no speech. Just a square of paper placed carefully, like offering a hand without grabbing one. "Thank you," Ethan said, barely above a breath. He didn't touch it. He wasn't sure if touching it would make him look weak or look human, and he didn't know which one would cost more right now. 2 college girls, up in 1D and 1F, had that phone out again. Not blatant, not hidden. The lens peered through the gap between headrests and armrest. The world's oldest keyhole turned into a small red dot that blinked record, record, record. The girl closest to the aisle whispered, "Go live?" And the other one nodded, thumb flicking without looking down. Live stream comments begin like rain. A tap here, a tap there, then suddenly they're everywhere. "What's happening? Did she hit him? Where are you, first class? No way. Who is the kid? Tag Atlas, tag everyone." The hearts fluttered up in a column. The numbers climbed like a thermometer left in the sun. "I need you to stop filming." Karen said it with recycled patience, the kind that has been heated too many times. "For privacy." The girl in 1D didn't answer. She bit her lip and kept the phone where it was. Privacy is a door that swings differently when it's protecting you versus protecting what happened to you. Everyone in the cabin knew which side was being shut right now. Ethan sat very still, palms flattened on his thighs. Stillness felt like control. It had since he was little. His mother had taught him that, how stillness can be a kind of gravity, how you can make people orbit your calm when your voice won't buy you a landing. The intercom chimed. Once, then again. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain said, voice careful as if he were stepping across a wet floor. "We are in communication with corporate and ground control. Please remain seated." A murmur rolled along the ceiling. Not loud enough to be rebellion, loud enough to be disbelief. Karen stood, smoothing her skirt in one motion like erasing a mistake. "As I said, momentary delay." She slipped the word momentary like a pill into everyone's mouth and waited for it to dissolve. She turned toward Ethan then, like remembering she'd left something on the stove. Her smile didn't travel to her eyes. "You understand we had a misunderstanding," she said, shaping each syllable like it might break. "We'll clear it up once we're on our way." Melissa's head came up. "Karen." "What?" Karen's laugh was a small, bright thing. "He's fine. See? He's fine." She looked to the cabin for agreement and found none. You could feel the room sliding, inch by inch, out from under her feet. "Ms. Lowell," the captain said from the cracked open cockpit door, "I need you up front a moment." Karen moved, relief melting into the swing of her step. At the cockpit threshold, she glanced back at Ethan, not with apology, but with calculation, as if measuring whether he'd keep quiet long enough for the world to forget. The door clicked shut. The cabin took another breath and held it. "Hey," the businessman in 2C said, softer this time. "Kid." He tipped his chin toward the tissue. "It's okay to, you know." Ethan touched the corner to his cheek, just once, where heat bumped under skin. He kept his eyes on the wing. He liked the way it didn't pretend to be anything but what it was, an airfoil built to lift heavy things. Somewhere behind him, a seatbelt snapped. A voice whispered, "He's so calm." Another voice answered, "He has to be." A third, "If that were my kid." The live stream chat bloomed. "He looks so small. My hands are shaking. Make this go viral. Who is he? Does anyone know who he is?" And then, because the internet hunts for names the way water hunts for cracks, someone typed, "He looks like the CEO's boy." Another picked it up. "CEO's son?" It wasn't a fact, it was a spark. Sparks don't ask for permission to become fire. The cabin door stayed shut. The engine stayed quiet. Time stretched itself between announcements, thin as taffy. Melissa stepped to Ethan's row and knelt. Forearms balanced on her thighs, posture non-threatening the way training videos teach. "Do you want water?" she asked. Then, gentler, "Do you want me to call someone for you?" Ethan shook his head. He was afraid if he said Mom out loud, the cabin would hear the capital letter. "Okay." Melissa's eyes watered at the edges the way eyes do when anger has nowhere to go but human. "You didn't deserve that." He nodded once. He let the words land and stay. He didn't apologize for accepting them. The cockpit door opened again. The captain looked older all of a sudden, as if his uniform had added years. He didn't step out. He spoke from the shadow. "We're returning to gate," he announced to the cabin. "Per corporate directive." Return. The word changed the air pressure. A few people groaned about missed connections. More people exhaled like they'd been underwater. Karen reappeared at the doorframe, color high in her cheeks. "This is unnecessary," she said to the captain. "Too bright, too loud. We can handle this in the air." "We're not in the air, Miss Lowell," he answered, and something final lived in the way he set down the microphone. "And we won't be until this is addressed." He shut the door again with professional care. Ethan watched the tug nudge the nose wheel into a turn, watched the terminal windows drift like slow-moving constellations. The woman in cream sweater folded her tissue wrapper into a neat square and slid it into her purse like filing away a piece of evidence she might need later. The phone in 1D kept streaming. The chat kept guessing. "He's the CEO's kid, right? This is going to blow up. Tag the FAA, tag the news, tag the world." Karen found her posture again and tried one last time to arrange the room to her liking. "Everyone, please remember we are a team up here," she said, as if politeness could be a fire extinguisher. "We maintain calm by trusting the crew." No one answered. Calm had already changed sides. The wheels kissed the jet bridge wheels. The soft thud ran underfoot like a heartbeat returning to its rhythm. Ethan unclenched his hands and discovered half moons where his nails had pressed his palms. He let his fingers loosen. He breathed in for 4, held for 4, out for 4, like his mother taught him for storms. He didn't know, not yet, what the internet had decided he was. He didn't know that a rumor had picked up his name and carried it where facts couldn't get fast enough. He only knew the shape of the silence had changed, less like a cage, more like a spotlight. Somewhere very close to this plane, a door would open. People would step through it who could move systems with a sentence. Maybe they were coming for him. Maybe they were coming because of him. Either way, he told himself the thing he would have told any kid in any seat in any cabin. Hold your place. Hold your breath. Hold your dignity. The door latch clacked. The jet bridge was locking on. The silence, at last, let go. The call didn't last long. It didn't have to. Inside Atlas Aero's glass headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, a board meeting had just started when every phone on the table vibrated at once. The head of operations frowned at the red priority banner that flashed across his tablet. Executive Order Override. Flight 1947. Source: Royce Primary Authority. He froze. "Wait, Dr. Royce is issuing a direct override?" The CFO looked up, confused. "She never does that mid-flight. What's the trigger?" No one answered. But somewhere on the 42nd floor, an entire company began to hold its breath. Meanwhile, on Flight 1847, the air still felt charged, like the seconds after lightning, when you don't know whether to flinch or watch. Passengers whispered to each other, half speculation, half fear. Every screen in first class showed the same frozen image. System hold. Await instruction. Karen Lowell sat rigid in the jump seat, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She stared at the boy across from her, the one who'd stayed silent since the slap. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even angry. He just looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made her nervous. When the intercom tone chimed again, she jumped. "Attention crew, this is the captain. All ground operations have been halted by corporate. Please maintain current positions until instructed." Melissa turned to Karen. "That's the CEO. Has to be." Karen scoffed, though her voice cracked. "What CEO? There's no way she'd—" Then she stopped. Her brain finally caught up with the pieces she'd been avoiding. The boy's composure, the name on his boarding pass, the quiet authority in his mother's voice through the phone. Ethan Royce. Her stomach dropped like the plane had just lost altitude. Down on the ground, Atlas Aero's command center looked like a movie set on fast forward. Analysts shouted across the room. Phones rang non-stop, and screens glowed with flight maps and blinking red icons. "Who triggered the hold?" a manager barked. "Direct command from Dr. Liana Royce." "What's the reason?" The operator hesitated. "It references crew misconduct in first class." The room went silent. Crew misconduct wasn't unusual, but a level 1 override was. That code didn't stop one plane. It froze the entire airline. No boarding, no departures, no arrivals. Hundreds of aircraft sat motionless in the sky and on the ground. A supervisor whispered, "That's costing us nearly $2.8 million a minute." "Then pray this isn't what I think it is," the CFO muttered. At JFK, gate cameras caught the black sedan pulling up beside the aircraft. No one inside wore uniforms. No one needed to. The door opened, and Dr. Liana Royce stepped out. No PR team, no security entourage. Just her. Her heels clicked once against the tarmac, sharp, deliberate, every motion measured. In the control tower, an air traffic controller whispered to a colleague, "That's her, the CEO herself." Inside the plane, passengers craned their necks toward the front door when the jet bridge reattached. Karen smoothed her hair and whispered to Melissa, "Don't say anything stupid. I can handle this." Melissa didn't respond. She just looked at the door like it might open the way truth does. Slow, unstoppable. The latch turned. The door swung. And there she was. Dr. Royce didn't have to raise her voice. Her presence filled the cabin without sound. Tailored charcoal suit. No jewelry except a thin gold watch. Calm face. Eyes that saw everything. "Good afternoon," she said, tone soft but resonant. "I'm Dr. Liana Royce, Chief Executive Officer of Atlas Aero." Karen's throat closed. "Dr. Royce, this is highly irregular, ma'am." Dr. Royce held up a hand. "You're correct. It is." She walked past her slowly, pausing by seat 3A. "Ethan?" Her son stood. "I stayed in my seat like you said." "I know." She reached out, brushing a thumb over the fading mark on his cheek. Her expression didn't change, but the silence afterward did. It thickened, became alive. Every passenger felt the weight of that quiet. Then she turned toward Karen. "Ms. Lowell," Dr. Royce said evenly, "would you care to explain why my child was assaulted on one of my aircraft?" Karen's lips parted, but words refused to come. "I didn't realize. I thought he—" "That's the point," Dr. Royce interrupted. "You thought, sir." Her tone didn't rise, but each word hit with surgical precision. "You thought his seat number couldn't be real. You thought a boy who looked like him must belong somewhere else. You thought you were maintaining order." Karen flinched. Dr. Royce's gaze didn't waver. "What you maintained was bias, and it ends today. Phones captured every second. The CEO, the trembling attendant, the mother and son reunited in the same frame. Within minutes, those images would break every feed, headline, and algorithm. But inside the cabin, the moment didn't feel like spectacle. It felt like gravity returning to its rightful center. Dr. Royce knelt beside Ethan so they were eye to eye. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "No, Mom." "Good. Because this—" She gestured at the frozen flight, the watching faces, the recording phones, "is what happens when silence breaks itself open." Then she stood, calm as ever, and turned to the captain. "Return us to the gate. This aircraft is no longer in service." The captain nodded, relief flooding his features. "Yes, ma'am." Karen started to speak again, desperate now. "Please, Dr. Royce, I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," Liana said. "You only needed to respect the passenger in front of you." When the engines powered down at the gate, the cabin erupted in whispers. The woman in the cream sweater wiped her eyes. The businessman in 2C whispered. "She just grounded her own airline." Melissa whispered to herself. "No, she just grounded arrogance." Liana turned toward the passengers. "Thank you all for your patience. You'll be rebooked and compensated for this delay. But before you leave, I want you to remember something." She looked around the room, at every phone and face, at the mix of fear and awe and understanding. "Dignity isn't negotiable," she said quietly. "Not even at 30,000 feet." Outside, news alerts were already breaking across social media. "Flight attendant slaps boy in first class. CEO grounds airline after learning the victim is her son." One call at Flight 1847 #dignity in the sky trending worldwide. The numbers scrolled in real time. 3.5 million views. Then 10, then 25. But Ethan didn't look at any of it. He leaned against his mother's side, listening to the quiet rhythm of her heartbeat. The same calm that had held an empire still. Somewhere far above the noise, Atlas Aero's fleet sat frozen in midair, waiting for her next command. And on one grounded plane at JFK, a boy who refused to move had reminded the world what power really looked like. The internet didn't light up slowly. It detonated. By the time Flight 1847 was towed back to the gate, the video had already hit 1 million views. By the time Ethan and his mother stepped off the jet bridge, it was at 10. The clip was only 47 seconds long. It started with a blurry image of a boy in a navy blazer and a woman in uniform. Then came the sound. Sharp, shocking, undeniable. The slap. The camera jolted. Gasps followed. The boy's small, stunned face filled the frame. The caption read, "Flight attendant just slapped a kid in first class. She doesn't know who his mom is." That sentence became the match. 2 hours later, #flight E47, #OneCall, and #dignity in the sky were trending in 43 countries. TikTok, Instagram Reels, and X spun it into every kind of story imaginable. Boy slapped on Atlas flight, CEO's son. She made one call and grounded the entire airline. Corporate revenge or moral justice? Comment sections turned into courtrooms. People picked sides, dissected tone, body language, even the shape of the slap. One user wrote, "This isn't just about a seat. This is about every time we've been told we don't belong." That comment alone pulled over 2.1 million likes. At the Atlas Aero headquarters, chaos spread faster than the news. Every wall screen flashed the same image, the paused video of Karen Lowell's raised hand. The PR director, Naomi Ellis, rubbed her temples. "This isn't a scandal anymore. It's a social movement." The CFO shot back, "It's a financial disaster. Our market cap just dropped $3.2 billion in 6 hours." "Because we deserved it," Naomi muttered under her breath. Dr. Liana Roy stood at the head of the long table, hands clasped loosely in front of her. Her posture didn't show panic. It showed purpose. "Do not delete the footage," she said calmly. "Do not issue a half apology." Her legal counsel frowned. "Ma'am, the union will file grievances if we don't control the narrative." Liana looked at him. "The narrative isn't ours to control. The truth belongs to everyone who watched it happen." Someone else whispered, "She's turning this into a case study in ethics." "No," Naomi said quietly, watching her boss. "She's turning it into accountability." Outside, cable networks and digital outlets fought for airtime. On one channel, a political commentator declared, "This is corporate warfare disguised as compassion." On another, a civil rights attorney countered, "It's the first time a CEO used her power to pause profit for principle." The public couldn't agree on what it was, but they agreed on how it felt. It felt like justice. Messy, viral, impossible to ignore justice. At home, in thousands of living rooms, people replayed the moment of the slap. Parents shook their heads. Teachers forwarded it to their colleagues. Teenagers stitched it with their own experiences of bias. The clip wasn't just about an airline anymore. It was about every door someone had been told not to walk through. Ethan's face became a symbol. One journalist wrote, "That boy's silence screamed louder than outrage ever could." Back in the Royce apartment, the world outside felt distant. Ethan sat on the couch in sweatpants, scrolling through his phone. The numbers didn't look real. 2.8 M likes, 56.4K comments. Some people called him brave. Some called him spoiled. And some, too many, said things his mother had warned him the world still said when it ran out of excuses. He put the phone face down. Dr. Royce was in the kitchen, still in her suit, typing on her laptop. He asked softly, "Was it my fault?" She stopped. "For being treated like less than you are?" He shook his head. "For the company losing money." Liana turned toward him. "Ethan, this isn't a loss. It's a reckoning." He frowned. "A reckoning?" "Yes," she said. "A reckoning is what happens when silence runs out of room." She walked over, sat beside him, and took his hand. "When I called that override," she said, "I didn't do it because you're my son. I did it because you could have been anyone's." Ethan stared at the floor. "Then why does everyone keep saying I'm the CEO's son?" "Because they need a story to make sense of it," she said. "They can't believe justice should exist for someone ordinary." Meanwhile, in Karen Lowell's apartment, the world was much smaller. Her name was on every news ticker. Her voicemail was full. Some calls angry, some cruel, some pitying. She had deleted every social app, but couldn't stop checking the browser anyway. A headline glared back. "Flight attendant suspended after slapping boy. CEO personally involved." She scrolled further down. Screenshots of her profile, her old posts, even a photo from her high school yearbook. They called her a villain. They called her a racist. They called her the face of everything wrong with customer service. Karen pressed her hands to her temples and whispered to the empty room, "I didn't mean to hit him." But even she knew meaning didn't matter anymore. Impact did. The next morning, Atlas Aero issued its official statement. But it wasn't written by the PR team. It was written by Dr. Royce herself. Yesterday, an incident occurred aboard Flight 1847 that reminded us all how fragile dignity becomes when power forgets humility. Atlas Aero is not grounded because of a child's pain. We are grounded because we must relearn what it means to serve. Every employee, from cabin to boardroom, will undergo ethics retraining. Every flight will now include a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. This is not crisis management. This is moral repair. She signed it simply, Dr. Liana Royce, CEO. The statement broke every rule of corporate crisis playbooks. No legal phrasing, no PR spin, just truth. It was shared 18 million times in 24 hours. That night, Ethan watched the world through the soft glow of his phone. Clips of protests at airports played alongside strangers hugging flight attendants who cried on camera. The same system that once humiliated him was now bending towards something better. And yet, what struck him most wasn't the anger online. It was the kindness that followed it. People posting, "I work ground crew. I saw that video. We're better than this." Others writing, "I used to fly Atlas. I'm proud again." Justice didn't roar this time. It rippled, quietly, patiently. Ethan leaned his head against the couch cushion and whispered to himself, it wasn't revenge, because he finally understood. His story wasn't about punishment. It was about what happens when a single act of dignity spreads faster than hate ever could. And somewhere, in a quiet boardroom overlooking the city, Dr. Royce smiled at the thought. Her company had stopped flying. But for the first time, it was finally learning how to rise. Morning sunlight poured through the 42nd floor windows of Atlas Aero headquarters, catching on glass walls and silver nameplates that suddenly felt like mirrors. Every corridor hummed with the same nervous energy, half disbelief, half damage control. By 8:15 a.m., the executive boardroom was full. Laptops open, coffee untouched. The headline glowed across the main screen. Atlas CEO grounds entire airline after son slapped in first class. Stock down 10.8%, market loss $2.9 billion. The CFO's pen clicked like a metronome. "We need to contain this before the markets open," he said. "We're hemorrhaging money by the second." Across the table, Dr. Liana Royce sat perfectly still, eyes on the screen but mind elsewhere. She hadn't slept, though no one could tell. Her calm looked unbreakable, but it wasn't the calm of indifference. It was the calm that comes right before a choice. The head of operations cleared her throat. "We can't stay grounded forever, Liana. Thousands of passengers are stranded. Crews are timing out. Regulators are calling. This," she gestured at the headline, "is unsustainable." "And unethical," the CFO added quickly. "You used a corporate override for a personal incident. That's a violation of the bylaw." Liana's gaze shifted to him. "You mean protecting a child's dignity is a violation of the bylaws?" The CFO blinked. "That's not what I said." "Then maybe it should be," she said softly. Down the table, Naomi Ellis, the PR director, slid a folder forward. "These are this morning's analytics," she said. "Public sentiment is 76% positive toward the decision to ground flights. They're calling it the most human corporate act of the decade." The CFO snorted. "Positive sentiment doesn't pay shareholders." Naomi didn't flinch. "Neither does moral bankruptcy." The tension cut sharp as glass. Liana interlaced her fingers. "This isn't a PR stunt. It's a reset. We forgot who we serve." "Liana," said Michael Torrance, chairman of the board, voice low and rehearsed. "You've always had a strong moral compass. We respect that. But the company can't be led by emotion." Her eyes flicked to him. "Then maybe that's the problem. We've been led by numbers so long we forgot numbers don't bleed." The room went quiet. Meanwhile, outside those glass walls, the world was watching. News drones circled above the Midtown Tower. Reporters clustered on the steps. Protesters carried cardboard signs. One call changed everything. Accountability at 30,000 feet. Dignity doesn't need a first-class ticket. Every hour, another celebrity reposted the video. Every hour, another airline issued its own review of training practices. Atlas Aero's stock had fallen, but its reputation was rising faster than algorithms could measure. Back inside, the legal counsel spoke cautiously. Dr. Royce, if you don't issue a clarification, people will assume favoritism. The public thinks Ethan was attacked because of who he is, not what happened. Liana's tone didn't waver. Let them think that for now. The counsel frowned. Excuse me. She folded her hands. The truth will come, but the point isn't who he is, it's why it happened. If I deny the rumor too soon, the world stops listening. Right now, they're paying attention, maybe for the first time. I won't waste that. Naomi smiled faintly. So you're letting the world believe a lie to make it face a truth? Liana's answer was quiet but clear. Exactly. At that same hour, Ethan sat on the apartment balcony, phone buzzing beside him with 1,000 unread notifications. A video clip of his mother's speech had already gone viral. Her calm declaration, "We are grounded because we must relearn what it means to serve." He scrolled through the comments. She's fearless. Finally, a CEO with a soul. This is bigger than a slap. It's a mirror. But buried under the praise were darker threads. Nepotism. Rich people drama. Would she care if it wasn't her kid? Ethan sighed. The world had turned his life into a morality play, and he wasn't sure what part he was supposed to play anymore. His phone buzzed again. Naomi's message. She's in a meeting with the board. It's getting heated. Stay calm, kid. He smiled. She always does, he whispered. Back in the boardroom, the CFO had moved from frustration to panic. Liana, the shareholders are demanding your resignation if flights aren't restored by noon. She stood, unhurried. Then they can have my resignation. The room erupted. You can't be serious. Liana, think about the optics. This could destroy us. She raised a hand. No. What destroyed us was thinking we could humiliate people in private and sell integrity in public. She stepped closer to the window. Down below, the protests were growing louder. I didn't ground Atlas Aero because of my son. I grounded it because our entire culture needed to land. We lost altitude years ago. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city, a reminder that the world outside these walls had already changed. Michael Torrance leaned back. You're going to make history or end your career today. Liana turned to him, her reflection sharp in the glass. Sometimes those are the same thing. By midday, her statement hit every news outlet. Atlas Aero will remain grounded until a full review of employee conduct and culture is complete. We will not fly again until every crew member understands that service begins with seeing the human being in front of them. The market shuddered. Stocks plunged another 3%. Analysts called her reckless. But social feeds flooded with praise. Thousands of Atlas employees began posting photos of themselves holding handwritten notes. I choose dignity. That night, as the skyline burned orange in the sunset, Liana finally went home. Ethan met her at the door. Did they fire you? He asked. She smiled faintly. Not yet. He hesitated. Mom, people think I'm the reason you did it. She crouched so they were eye to eye. You're not the reason, Ethan. You're the reminder. He frowned. Reminder of what? She brushed his cheek gently, where the mark had almost faded. That even the smallest injustice can ground an empire. He leaned into her hand. What happens now? She looked out toward the skyline, where Atlas Aero's logo glowed faintly against the clouds. Now, she said, we see who still wants to fly. The board met again 48 hours later, but the atmosphere had changed. The frenzy had cooled into something colder. Calculation. Markets had steadied after the free fall, and every major network was still looping the same clip. Dr. Liana Royce standing in the aisle of Flight 1847, hand on her son's shoulder, saying in that calm, impossible voice, "Dignity isn't negotiable." In the corner of the conference room, the CFO whispered, "That sentence cost us $3 billion. Liana heard him, but didn't answer. She was watching the skyline. Planes lifted from other airlines, climbing through bright September air. Atlas Aero's fleet was still on the ground, wings folded, engines silent. Michael Torrance, the chairman, broke the quiet. "We're here to vote," he said. "Either we restore operations and issue a controlled statement, or we accept the losses and continue this moral crusade." He said the last two words like they were toxic. Naomi Ellis, head of PR, spoke first. "Public support is still strong. If we reopen too soon, we lose the credibility that's making people trust us again." The CFO shook his head. "Trust doesn't pay payroll. We have 40,000 employees waiting for checks." Liana turned from the window. "They'll still have jobs when this is over, if we give them a company worth working for." A projector hummed to life. Numbers filled the wall. Share price, daily burn rate, estimated brand value recovery. The finance team had color-coded the damage. Red for loss, green for potential goodwill. The red blocks dominated. Michael folded his hands. "Liana, none of us doubts your intentions. But we have fiduciary duties. You've grounded an airline for 2 days. You're talking about grounding it indefinitely. You're forcing this board to choose between ethics and survival." She smiled faintly. "That's not a new choice. It's just one we've been pretending didn't exist." He sighed. "If you continue to refuse reopening, I'll have to call a vote of no confidence." Her eyes met his. "Then call it." Meanwhile, in the employee cafe 10 floors below, hundreds of Atlas workers crowded around a wall screen streaming the meeting live. Mechanics in orange coveralls stood shoulder to shoulder with flight attendants still in uniform. Someone had printed a sign and taped it over the espresso machine. One call changed everything. When Liana appeared on the screen, the room fell silent. She looked smaller without the cameras, but her voice carried the same steadiness. "I grounded Atlas because a child was struck on our plane," she said. "That incident wasn't an accident. It was a reflection. Every system, every policy, every unchecked habit that told one employee she had the right to decide who belonged in first class. Those are ours to fix." The CFO leaned toward his microphone. "Dr. Royce, we can fix training without destroying market confidence." Liana shook her head. "Training won't touch what's underneath. Culture isn't a module, it's a mirror." Someone in the cafe whispered, "She's going to lose her job for this." Another answered, "Then maybe she should be running the country." Back upstairs, Michael called for the vote. Hands rose one by one. 7 in favor of reopening, 4 against, 1 abstention. The motion passed. He exhaled. "Flights will resume tomorrow." Liana didn't move. "Then I resign," she said quietly. The words hit the room like turbulence. Naomi stood halfway. "Liana, don't." But Liana was already gathering her papers. "You've all made your decision. Now I'll make mine." Michael frowned. "You'd walk away from the company you built?" She paused at the door. "No, I'm walking away from the version of it that forgot why it existed." That evening, Naomi found her on the observation deck of the hangar complex at JFK. Below them, rows of silver planes gleamed under floodlights. The grounded fleet looked like an army waiting for orders that wouldn't come. "You could fight this," Naomi said softly. "You have enough votes from shareholders who support you." Liana shook her head. "If I fight them, it becomes about me. This has to stay about us." Naomi leaned on the railing. "They'll reopen tomorrow." "I know." Liana's eyes followed a plane from another airline rising into the night. "Let them. Atlas will fly again. But before it does, the world saw what still needs to change. That won't disappear." Naomi nodded. "The stock's already rebounding. People trust you." Liana smiled faintly. "Trust built on outrage is fragile. It needs time to harden into respect." Across the city, Ethan watched the same plane climb from the balcony. The lights traced a path across the dark like a promise. His phone buzzed. Naomi's message. She resigned. He read it twice, then set the phone down. For the first time in days, he felt the ache behind everything that had happened. The slap, the silence, the viral fire. He wasn't angry anymore. He just felt the weight of what justice costs. When his mother came home later, she didn't look defeated. She looked lighter. "Are we poor now?" he joked weakly. "Not in the ways that matter," she said. She poured tea for both of them and sat on the floor beside him, suit jacket off, hair loose. Sometimes you have to land before you can really fly. He thought about the planes sitting still, waiting. "Will they fix it?" "They will," she said. "Maybe not tomorrow, but someone will remember what we tried to do." He hesitated. "You don't regret it?" Her answer was immediate. "Ethan, if standing still for one day makes the world move an inch closer to decency, that's not regret. That's progress." Outside, the wind shifted, scattering city noise like distant applause. Somewhere in a newsroom, a new headline was already forming. "CEO resigns after standing against bias. Investors call it reckless. Employees call it reform." And on the ground below, an Atlas maintenance worker snapped a photo of the silent planes and posted it with 3 words that would go viral again. "Still grounded. Still proud." The resignation hit harder than any headline. By sunrise, every major outlet ran the same phrase in bold letters. "CEO steps down after refusing to compromise on dignity." The world couldn't decide whether to call it bravery or madness. Investors called it betrayal. Employees called it proof that someone at the top had finally meant what they said. But for Atlas Aero, the fallout came fast. 8:03 a.m. The markets opened. Atlas stock plunged another 12% in the first hour. Analysts on CNBC called it a masterclass in moral self-sabotage. Commentators debated whether Dr. Liana Royce had broken her fiduciary duty or rewritten corporate ethics. The CFO, now interim CEO, appeared on camera, pale and defensive. "Atlas will resume flights immediately. We value integrity, but stability must come first." The reporter cut him off. "So you're saying the woman who built this company destroyed it?" He hesitated, blinked, then muttered, "She acted alone." That phrase, "she acted alone," spread faster than the stock could fall. Outside the headquarters, crowds gathered again. But this time, the signs were split. "Stand with Royce. Bring her back. Enough with symbols. We need jobs." The protest had become a mirror of the nation itself. Half furious at the injustice she'd exposed, half terrified of the chaos she'd left behind. A woman holding a stroller told a news crew, "She did the right thing, but my husband's grounded because of it." Nearby, a flight attendant wiped tears under her sunglasses. "She showed us what leadership looks like. I just wish we didn't have to pay for it." Inside a New York newsroom, a young journalist named Elena Vasquez watched the coverage unfold. She'd been the one who wrote the first viral article about the incident. A slap heard around the skies. Now her editor leaned over her desk. "We need a follow-up. Public sentiment splitting. Make it punchy. Is she a hero or a hypocrite?" Elena shook her head. "She's neither. She's a mirror, and people hate what they see in it." Meanwhile, at a quiet cafe in Harlem, Ethan sat opposite his mother for the first time since her resignation. The air smelled of espresso and rain. He pushed a newspaper toward her. "They're saying you tanked the company." Liana glanced at the headline, "Royce's principles cost Atlas billions," and folded the paper shut. "I didn't tank it," she said softly. "I landed it." Ethan frowned. "But everyone's mad. Even your board, even people who agreed with you." "Change always looks like collapse before it looks like progress," she said. "The system has to break before it learns how to bend." He leaned forward. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed quiet?" Her eyes softened. "No. Silence was never peace. It was just a slower kind of surrender." That afternoon, Congress announced a formal inquiry into discrimination across the airline industry. Civil rights groups demanded hearings. Rivals scrambled to distance themselves from Atlas. But the footage from Flight 1947 was already woven into every debate show, classroom, and sermon in the country. One commentator said, "This isn't about airlines anymore. It's about who gets to belong in the first-class cabin of America." Another scoffed, "It's about a CEO who made herself a martyr." Neither was completely wrong. At Atlas headquarters, the interim CEO convened an emergency call with investors. Charts filled the wall. Losses, cancellations, boycotts. But Naomi Ellis, still head of PR, interrupted the panic. "Look closer," she said. "Our brand searches have tripled. Customer trust metrics, rising. Job applications, rising. People don't hate us. They hate what we stood for before she left." The CFO glared. "We can't build a company on moral applause," Naomi shot back. "Maybe not, but we can rebuild one on respect." She didn't say it out loud, but she knew what Liana had done. She'd turned a corporation into a conscience, and conscience doesn't trade well on Wall Street. By evening, a hashtag began trending again, Hatch-Royce effect. People used it to share their own experiences, moments when they'd been told to move, to quiet down, to accept less. The hashtag reached 20 million posts within 2 days. Airlines quietly reviewed their policies. A few even issued internal memos titled Passenger Dignity Guidelines. But the backlash didn't stop. A conservative columnist wrote, "Royce poisoned the economy with empathy." A late-night host joked, "She grounded planes to teach us feelings." And through it all, Liana stayed silent. 3 nights later, Naomi visited her at home. Liana was sitting at her dining table, laptop open but untouched. Naomi sighed. "You've seen the markets?" "Yes." "And the calls for your reinstatement?" Liana smiled slightly. "Also yes." Naomi set her bag down. "You could come back. They're desperate. The board's fractured. The union's threatening a walkout unless you return." Liana looked out the window at the city lights flickering like runway beacons. "They don't need me back, Naomi. They need to remember why I left." Naomi frowned. "You made people believe again. You can't just vanish now." "I'm not vanishing," Liana said. "I'm giving them space to choose what kind of company they want to be when I'm not standing over them." Naomi studied her. "And if they choose wrong, then I'll show them what choosing right looks like again." Across the country, small acts began echoing her philosophy. A diner in Atlanta put up a sign, "Respect served here." A school in Detroit hosted a student forum titled Grounded for Good. And a single mom in Dallas posted a viral video of herself quitting her job after being told to smile more. She ended her clip with, "If she can ground planes, I can ground my own silence." By the end of the week, stock prices began climbing again. Not because of apologies or press releases, but because people started booking Atlas flights on purpose. A viral tweet said it best, "Flying Atlas today. Not because they're perfect, because they tried." Liana read it in silence, then closed her laptop. The storm hadn't ended, but the direction of the wind had changed. Ethan found her on the balcony. "Are you watching the news?" She smiled. "No, I'm watching the world catch up." He leaned against her shoulder. "Do you think they'll ever forgive you?" She laughed softly. "Maybe not, but maybe they'll start forgiving themselves." Outside, the skyline shimmered. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of an Atlas engine rolled across the sky, its first test flight since the grounding. The plane lifted, small and silver, slicing through the night. Liana watched it disappear into the dark. "They're flying again," she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze. "Because of you?" She shook her head. "No, because of what we made them see." It began, like most reckonings, with an email that wasn't meant to be found. Naomi Ellis was still at Atlas Aero headquarters late one night, sifting through internal archives for the next press briefing. The glow from her screen reflected off her coffee cup, cold hours ago. When the search filter glitched, a string of archived messages appeared. Unmarked, unsorted, half-deleted. The subject line on one froze her breath. "RE, suppress footage. Flight 11847. Her pulse quickened. She clicked it. The email chain showed timestamps from the morning after the slap. The sender, CFO Alan Harkness, the same man who'd replaced Dr. Liana Royce as interim CEO. The recipients, the legal department, security, and a media relations firm notorious for cleaning up scandals. Contain the video. Reach out to the social team. Flag all footage under privacy violation. This incident cannot go viral before the markets open. The message was dated 1 hour before the clip hit 1 million views. Naomi's hands trembled. They'd known. They hadn't tried to protect the passengers. They'd tried to protect the profit. By dawn, the evidence was printed, documented, and locked in a black folder. Naomi sat at her desk, staring at it, knowing what it meant. If she went public, she'd destroy careers, and maybe the company. But if she stayed silent, she'd betray everything Liana had stood for. The choice wasn't between loyalty and rebellion. It was between conscience and complicity. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in weeks. "Dr. Royce?" she whispered. "It's Naomi." Pause. Then a calm, familiar voice. "You found it, didn't you?" That afternoon, in a quiet cafe near Battery Park, Naomi slid the folder across the table. Liana didn't open it right away. She looked at Naomi instead, eyes steady but kind. "I always suspected it," Liana said softly. "But suspicion isn't proof." Naomi exhaled. "Now it's both." Liana opened the folder. Her expression didn't change. No shock, no anger, only confirmation. She'd known power always tried to bury its own shame, but this was proof that the system hadn't failed accidentally. It had chosen to fail. "Will you leak it?" Naomi asked. Liana shook her head. "Not yet. Truth deserves timing." Naomi frowned. "Timing? Liana, they erased your work. They lied about the grounding. They said you acted alone." "I did," Liana said quietly. "But they didn't. And when the world sees that, I want them to understand the difference." Meanwhile, Ethan was at school when the first rumor broke. His classmates had seen headlines. "Whistleblower claims cover-up inside Atlas." He pretended not to hear the whispers, but one kid muttered too loudly, "Guess his mom wasn't so noble after all." That night, he came home angry. "Mom, why don't you fight them?" he demanded. "You could clear your name in one post." Liana looked up from her notes. "Fighting for my name isn't the goal. Fighting for the truth is." "But they're lying." "They're always lying, Ethan. That's what power does when it's cornered. The question is, can we make truth louder without screaming?" He didn't answer, but something in her calm steadiness broke through his frustration. The next morning, the Washington Ledger published the leak. Not from Naomi, not from Liana. From a union insider who'd seen the same email chain forwarded in error. The story hit like lightning. Atlas executives tried to suppress Flight 1847 footage before viral outrage. Within hours, the media framed it as a conspiracy. Lawmakers demanded hearings. Stock prices wobbled again. But this time, the outrage wasn't against Liana. It was against those who'd replaced her. Every news anchor repeated the same damning line. They didn't just try to silence a woman. They tried to erase a reckoning. At headquarters, chaos reigned. Alan Harkness faced the cameras, sweat beading under the studio lights. "We followed legal protocol," he said stiffly. There was no intent to conceal. But when reporters pulled the timestamps from the email, it was clear. They'd known before the footage even trended. Naomi watched the live feed from her office, heart pounding. Justice wasn't loud. It was inevitable. That night, Liana appeared on live television for the first time since her resignation. She wore no makeup, no power suit, just a simple navy blouse and her calm, deliberate tone. The host asked the question everyone wanted to hear. "Dr. Royce, what do you say to those who call this revenge?" She smiled faintly. "This was never about revenge stories. It's about reflection stories, about making the powerful see what they've refused to look at." The host leaned in. "Do you feel vindicated?" "No," she said. "Vindication means someone else loses. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in repair." Her words spread faster than the leak. Social feeds exploded with quotes, stitched videos, and commentary. People weren't arguing anymore. They were listening. The following day, the Department of Transportation announced an investigation into Atlas's leadership conduct. Shareholders called an emergency meeting, not to oust Liana this time, but to beg her to return. She refused. Instead, she offered them something else, a blueprint. It was a document she'd written the night before her resignation, the Royce Charter, a policy manual outlining transparency standards for the aviation industry. Anonymous reporting, live-tracked accountability logs, third-party audits. She sent it to every airline, every regulator, every union in the country. And at the bottom, she signed it not as CEO, but as Liana Royce, passenger. 2 weeks later, Congress called her to testify. Cameras flashed as she walked into the hearing chamber. The same captain who had once asked her to be flexible sat behind her, suspended pending review. When the committee chair asked her why she'd risked everything, she answered simply, because silence was more expensive than truth. The room went still. That evening, Ethan watched the broadcast with a quiet pride that hurt his chest. His mother hadn't shouted, hadn't raged, hadn't sought revenge. She'd simply stood. And somehow, the world had moved. He turned to her afterward. "Was it worth it?" She smiled gently. "Ask me again when the system apologizes to someone who isn't famous." He nodded slowly, understanding. Outside, headlines rolled across every screen. Royce Charter gains global momentum. Airlines commit to new dignity standards. Atlas executives resign amid cover-up scandal. And somewhere between the noise and the silence, justice found its footing, not through fury, but through exposure. Because sometimes, truth doesn't arrive with thunder. It lands quietly, like a plane returning home. The hearing ended not with applause, but with silence. The kind of silence that feels like change beginning to breathe. By the time Dr. Liana Royce stepped outside the Capitol building, the air smelled of rain and electricity. Reporters shouted her name, flashes stung her eyes, but she didn't stop. She'd said everything she came to say. The truth was out. The rest would take time. 3 weeks later, that time began. Atlas Aero's board collapsed under public pressure. The interim CEO resigned after a government probe confirmed he'd ordered the cover-up. For the first time in the airline's 70-year history, the shareholders voted not for profit, but for reform. They didn't beg Liana to return as CEO. They asked her to lead something bigger, a cross-industry initiative, a new standard. She called it the Royce Accord. It wasn't a PR campaign. It was an accountability blueprint for the entire aviation sector. Real-time misconduct reporting visible to the public. Passenger dignity audits run by third-party ethics boards. A universal code of conduct called Seat Zero. The reminder that everyone, from captain to customer, starts with the same worth. Airlines from Singapore to Seattle signed within a month. Government agencies followed. For the first time, justice wasn't reactive. It was systemic. Inside her home office, Liana's desk was covered in drafts and notes. Ethan leaned against the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're rebuilding the sky from scratch," he said, smiling. She looked up, exhaustion and quiet pride mixing in her eyes. "I'm just rewriting the rules of altitude." He set her coffee down. "Does it ever feel strange? The same people who hated you now quote you like scripture?" Liana chuckled softly. "Public memory has the lifespan of a tweet, but if even one policy lasts longer than that, it's worth it." In a small conference hall at JFK, hundreds of flight attendants, mechanics, and gate agents gathered for the first Royce Leadership Forum. The banner on the stage read, "Respect, Reform, Responsibility." Liana stood at the podium. No teleprompter, no script. "When I grounded the airline," she began, "I thought I was stopping something small, a single injustice. What I learned is that injustice is never small. It just hides in small places. She paused, meeting the faces in the crowd, some still skeptical, some hopeful, all listening. This isn't about guilt. It's about growth, about realizing that accountability doesn't destroy business. It builds it. Because when you earn trust, profit follows. When you defend dignity, loyalty lasts. Applause rippled, hesitant at first, then rising like a wave. Across the country, schools began teaching the Flight 1847 case in ethics classes. Documentaries framed it as the moment corporate America remembered its conscience. Even late-night hosts stopped joking and started quoting her words. A viral soundbite from the hearing echoed everywhere. Silence was more expensive than truth. But not everyone celebrated. A group of former executives launched a smear campaign, claiming the Royce Accord was anti-corporate propaganda. Investors warned of rising operational costs. Commentators accused her of turning compassion into policy. When a reporter asked her about it, Liana only said, "If fairness feels like a threat, maybe you weren't building strength to begin with." Meanwhile, Naomi Ellis, now the newly appointed chief ethics officer, called Liana one evening. "They're asking if you'll accept an advisory seat on the Global Aviation Council." Liana looked out the window at the fading sunset. "Advisory, not authority," she said. Naomi laughed. "You really can't sit still, can you?" "I've spent my life at 30,000 feet, Liana replied. "Grounding was the best view I ever had." The next morning, Liana stood at a press conference announcing the Royce Fellowship, a scholarship for underrepresented students in aviation and technology. 100 awards each year, fully funded. When the cameras dimmed, a journalist asked, "Why name it after yourself?" Liana smiled. "It isn't about me, it's about legacy. And legacy means leaving a seat open for someone who's never been invited to sit." In the months that followed, the ripple became a tide. Airlines implemented new ethics training. The FAA introduced transparency dashboards for passenger complaints. International carriers joined the accord, citing it as a model for the modern era of travel. Stock prices stabilized. Atlas Aero not only recovered, it grew. Customers returned, not because of advertising, but because they wanted to fly with a company that had faced its own truth. One analyst put it simply, Atlas turned a scandal into a standard. At home one night, Ethan scrolled through photos from the fellowship ceremony. "Mom," he said, "you know the girl who got the first scholarship? Her last name's Hartwell." Liana looked up slowly. "Victoria Hartwell's granddaughter?" He nodded. "You knew?" She smiled faintly. "I approved her application myself." Ethan blinked. "After everything her grandmother did to you?" Liana's answer was quiet but firm. "Grace isn't forgetting. It's choosing what the future deserves more than the past." Later that evening, she walked onto her balcony, the city glittering below. Planes crossed the horizon in silver streaks, tracing order against chaos. For the first time since the flight, she didn't feel the weight of the sky. She felt its possibility. Her phone buzzed, a message from Naomi. "The Accord just hit 1 million global signatories." Liana smiled, typing back, "That's 1 million chances to get it right." She put the phone down and whispered into the night, "We're finally flying for the right reasons." It was 1 year to the day since Flight 1847. The world had changed in ways that no algorithm could have predicted. Airports now displayed passenger dignity codes on digital billboards. Airlines, once allergic to the word accountability, now bragged about it in commercials. But for Dr. Liana Royce, the transformation wasn't in policies or profits. It was in people. The morning sunlight spilled into the Royce Foundation Hall, where hundreds gathered for the first graduation of the Royce Fellowship. Students in navy blazers filled the stage, each wearing a pin shaped like a small silver wing, the symbol of the movement that had begun with one quiet act of defiance. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but Liana stood off to the side. Not at the podium. She didn't want to be the story anymore. Naomi approached, tablet in hand. "Press wants you to speak," she said. Liana smiled. Let the fellows speak. I've already had my chapter. But when the host called her name, the crowd rose anyway. The applause was soft at first, then rolling, echoing off the marble walls. She stepped forward slowly, her voice gentle but firm. 1 year ago, she began, a flight was grounded because someone forgot that power doesn't come from status. It comes from how you treat those who have none. Today, we're taking off again, not just in the skies, but in spirit. She paused, glancing at the faces of the students before her. This fellowship isn't about what I did. It's about what you'll do when no one's recording, when justice isn't trending, when silence seems safer, because that's where real change lives. The room was still. For a moment, even the cameras didn't click. After the ceremony, Ethan found her standing backstage, watching the students laugh and pose for photos. You didn't tell me you were going to speak, he said. I didn't know I would, she replied. Sometimes the story asks for one more line. He grinned. The world calls you the woman who grounded an airline. Liana chuckled. I prefer the woman who helped it learn to land. That evening, the two of them drove to JFK, where one of the newly refurbished Atlas Aerojets was being dedicated. The plane bore a new name on its nose. Flight 1947, the Dignity Line. Executives, crew, and journalists gathered under the hangar lights. A reporter asked Liana, what does this moment mean to you? She looked up at the massive aircraft gleaming silver and white. It means the world didn't just react, it remembered. Later, inside the hangar, a small group waited quietly near the back. Among them was a young woman in her early 20s, clutching a letter. Her badge read, Ava Hartwell, Royce Fellow. Naomi approached Liana. She asked to speak with you. Ava stepped forward nervously. Dr. Royce, my grandmother, Victoria, passed away last month. I know what she did to your son. I know how it must have hurt. But I wanted to thank you for still choosing me. Liana studied her for a long moment. The girl had Victoria's eyes, but not her arrogance. Just a tremor of inherited shame and the courage to confront it. She smiled gently. Ava, I didn't choose you in spite of your name. I chose you because of what you could do with it. The girl's eyes shimmered. I won't waste it. Liana placed a hand on her shoulder. Then you've already redeemed it. That night, back home, Liana stood on her balcony overlooking the city. The sky hummed softly with the movement of planes, each one a promise that systems could evolve, that power could be reshaped. Ethan joined her, phone in hand. Look, he said, you're trending again. She laughed softly. For what this time? He read the top headline aloud. The woman who grounded a flight teaches the world to fly again. He looked up at her. You did it. She shook her head. We did it. Every person who spoke, recorded, marched, or refused to move. I just happened to be the one sitting closest to the storm. Later that week, she recorded a final public address. A message not for the press, but for the next generation of storytellers, pilots, and quiet reformers who would inherit her vision. Her voice, calm and measured, filled the frame. Power isn't proven by how loudly you rise. It's revealed by how gently you lift others. The real legacy of Flight 1847 isn't justice served. It's grace continued. If someone ever tells you that dignity is optional, tell them the sky disagrees. The video went viral overnight, shared by educators, activists, and airlines alike. It became part of training programs and classrooms around the world. Months later, Naomi visited her office for the last time before taking over as president of the Royce Foundation. You're sure you want to step back? She asked. Liana nodded. I'm sure. Legacy doesn't need supervision. It just needs stewardship. Naomi smiled. You've changed how the world travels. Liana looked out at the runway where a Royce Fellows training flight was taxiing. No, she said quietly. They changed how it lands. That night, the city glowed beneath her balcony. Ethan joined her again, older now, taller, his voice deeper. You think it's over? He asked. Liana smiled. Justice doesn't end, Ethan. It just learns new names. He looked at the sky. Do you ever think about that day? She nodded slowly. Every time I see a plane take off, every time I see someone treated with respect who might not have been before. He leaned on the railing beside her. You know, you could have ended this story with revenge. She turned to him, eyes bright. And then it would have ended. But grace keeps it going. Below them, the night sky pulsed with light. Planes rose and fell like heartbeats. Somewhere in the distance, the faint glimmer of one particular aircraft shimmered. A flight named not for tragedy, but for transformation. And as it disappeared into the dark, Liana whispered, almost to herself, "May every journey begin where dignity lives."